December 27, 1942, Port Moresby, New Guinea. At dawn, the humid air of Loki Airfield shimmered as ground crews rolled back camouflage netting from the distinctive twin-boom silhouettes lined neatly across the steel-plated runway. 12 Lockheed P-38 Lightnings from the 39th Fighter Squadron of the 35th Fighter Group stood ready, refueled, armed, and gleaming in the tropical morning sun. Moments later, a message crackled through from the coast watchers. Major Japanese air raid forming, multiple bomber groups approaching Buna, approximately 40 enemy aircraft with fighter escort confirmed, estimated interception time 30 minutes. Captain Thomas Lynch glanced over his instruments and gave the signal to his flight. Among his men was Second Lieutenant Richard Bong, temporarily attached from the 9th Squadron of the 49th Fighter Group, still waiting for their own Lightnings to arrive. None of them realized that the battle about to unfold would forever change the course of aerial warfare in the Pacific. Until that morning, Japanese pilots had only glimpsed the new twin-boom American fighter. Their intelligence reports were vague, uncertain about what this strange machine could do. Within hours, that uncertainty would turn into alarm and disbelief. For more than a year, the Imperial Japanese Navy's elite airmen had reigned supreme over the Pacific. The Mitsubishi A6M0's agility was legendary, a turn radius of just 950 feet, a climb to 6,000 feet in 7.5 minutes, and a top speed of 331 mph. Those figures had translated into near-total dominance in China and across the early Pacific campaigns. American flyers in their Bell P-39 Airacobras and Curtiss P-40 Warhawks had learned through brutal experience that to engage a Zero in a turning fight was to court certain death. But the Lockheed P-38 Lightning was a new breed of fighter, a revolutionary concept in air combat. Its twin Allison V-1710 engines, each generating 1,150 horsepower and boosted by turbo superchargers, maintained full power at heights where other aircraft gasped for air. The Lightning could reach 414 mph, climb to 44,000 feet, and unleash devastating firepower from a nose-mounted battery, a single 20mm Hispano cannon flanked by 4.50 caliber Browning machine guns. Because all weapons were fixed in the nose, the Lightning's fire was concentrated and accurate, free from the convergence issues that plagued wing-mounted guns. Lieutenant Richard Bong, a farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin, had memorized these stats during training at Hamilton Field, California. He knew instinctively that the P-38's edge lay not in trying to outturn the Zero, but in exploiting its unmatched speed, altitude, and striking power. The key was discipline: strike from above, dive through the formation, climb back to altitude, and attack again. These boom and zoom tactics were the complete opposite of the romantic dogfighting traditions most pilots had been raised on. Meanwhile, high above the jungle, veteran Japanese airmen from the Rabaul-based naval air groups settled into their escort formation. Their task force, a mix of Mitsubishi A6M0s, Nakajima Ki-43 Oscars, and Aichi D-3A Val dive bombers, represented the finest Japan could field. These were the same pilots who had swept the skies from Pearl Harbor to the Dutch East Indies, rarely facing serious resistance. To them, the day's mission seemed routine: escort the bombers to Buna, eliminate any opposition, and return to base. Though they had occasionally spotted strange twin-boom aircraft in recent weeks, most assumed they were reconnaissance planes or light bombers. None imagined that America had produced a fighter designed specifically to destroy them. At 18,000 feet, Captain Lynch's P-38s held every possible advantage. Lynch led the attack, pushing his Lightning into a steep dive that quickly passed 400 mph. Behind him, Bong and the others lined up their targets. From over 400 yards away, they opened fire, far beyond the reach of the Zero's light armament. Lynch's cannon shells tore into an Oscar, shredding it mid-air. As Lynch climbed back through the clouds, Zero pilots dove to pursue, only to feel their aircraft shaking violently as they neared 400 mph. Warning lights flashed. They were on the edge of structural failure. Bong spotted a Zero swinging in behind Lynch and rolled sharply, firing a deflection burst that hit home. The enemy fighter spiraled earthward in flames. Almost immediately, 3 more Zeros converged on Bong. He slammed the throttles forward, his P-38 surging to over 450 mph in a screaming dive. The Japanese pilots could do nothing but watch the silver twin-boom fighter vanish ahead, unreachable, untouchable. Leveling out just above the jungle canopy, Bong spotted a Val bomber pulling up from its dive. He fired a short burst from 100 yards. The Val erupted in flames and plunged into the trees. These 2 victories marked Bong's first confirmed kills, the start of what would become the most successful American fighter ace career of the war. The entire engagement lasted less than 10 minutes. The 39th Squadron claimed 12 Japanese aircraft destroyed, with confirmed kills by Lynch, Bong, and Second Lieutenant Carl Planck. Not a single P-38 was lost. Japanese after-action reports reflected confusion and disbelief. Pilots described facing aircraft with impossible speed and climb, capable of firing accurately from beyond normal range. The comfortable world of horizontal turning combat, the domain where Japanese pilots excelled, had been replaced by a vertical battlefield dominated by speed, altitude, and hit-and-run precision. News of the encounter sent shockwaves through Japanese Naval Aviation headquarters at Rabaul. Intelligence officers hurried to re-evaluate the mysterious P-38. Its twin engines had led them to dismiss it as a heavy, lumbering aircraft, never imagining that American engineers had created a fighter designed to win through altitude and power, rather than agility. That realization, that the Americans had redefined what a fighter could be, marked the dawn of a new era in air combat. The P-38's turbo superchargers allowed it to keep full power even at extreme altitudes, while conventional Japanese engines lost nearly half their output. From that day on, the Lightning would live up to its name, striking fast, striking hard, and changing the balance of the Pacific skies forever. The P-38's diving speed approached the sound barrier, faster than any Japanese aircraft could follow without risking structural collapse. Its unmatched ability to trade speed for altitude meant that Lightning pilots could regain their commanding position above enemy formations within seconds after an attack. By January 7, 1943, the reality of this new threat had become impossible to ignore. On that day, 9 P-38s escorting bombers near Lai encountered roughly 20 Japanese fighters. Traditional doctrine would have suggested that the smaller American force assume a defensive posture. Instead, the Lightnings climbed confidently to 25,000 feet and began diving assaults from altitudes far beyond the reach of their opponents. Lieutenant Richard Bong, now flying regularly with the 39th Squadron while waiting for his own unit's Lightnings to arrive, showcased the aircraft's deadly precision. Diving from high altitude, he lined up a Ki-43 Oscar and brought it down with a deflection shot from 300 yards. When the Japanese fighters tried to climb toward him, Bong performed a chandelle maneuver that carried him smoothly back to 20,000 feet, completely beyond their ability to follow. From that elevated perch, he picked out another target and repeated the attack. The very geometry of aerial combat had changed. The Japanese Zero, though unmatched in maneuverability, could not dive with the Lightning without shaking apart. It could not follow the P-38's vertical climb without stalling, and it could not pursue the American fighter when it chose to disengage using superior speed. The familiar horizontal plane of combat, the turning dogfights where Japanese pilots excelled, had been replaced by a three-dimensional arena in which altitude and velocity determined victory. Experienced Zero pilots struggled to adapt, for their entire training revolved around close-quarters maneuvering, gaining an opponent's tail through superior turning skill. Against the P-38, those tactics were worthless. By the time a Zero pilot lined up for a shot, the Lightning had already pulled away, climbing effortlessly into altitudes the Japanese aircraft couldn't reach. The psychological effect was devastating. Pilots who had once enjoyed complete air superiority now found themselves powerless against an enemy that refused to fight by their rules. The constant pressure of watching the skies above, knowing that death could strike from unseen heights, began to erode morale. Some flyers exhibited symptoms of combat fatigue, a condition virtually unknown in Japanese military culture up to that point. By February 1943, the American P-38 presence across the Southwest Pacific was growing rapidly. The 9th Fighter Squadron of the 49th Fighter Group finally received its long-awaited Lightnings, while the 80th Fighter Squadron of the 8th Group began transitioning from P-39s. In Australia, the 475th Fighter Group, an all-Lightning formation, was taking shape. Each new unit trained using the battle reports from Lynch, Bong, and other pioneers, perfecting tactics that exploited the aircraft's unmatched strengths. Training emphasized one overriding principle: altitude discipline. Altitude is life insurance became the universal mantra, followed closely by speed is life. Pilots learned to fight the instinct to engage in turning battles, maintaining high velocity and using vertical maneuvers instead. The high-speed yo-yo allowed a P-38 to convert extra speed into altitude while changing direction, while the barrel roll attack kept guns trained on target without losing momentum. Japanese countermeasures failed to close the gap. The Kawasaki Ki-61 Tony, with its liquid-cooled engine and heavier weaponry, was designed to intercept high-flying American bombers, but it still couldn't compete with the P-38 above 20,000 feet. The Nakajima Ki-44 Shoki, built for speed and climb, remained inferior in both categories. Japanese intelligence reports from early 1943 revealed growing alarm. Pilots were ordered to avoid combat with P-38s unless they held overwhelming numerical superiority and a clear positional advantage. Even then, engagements above 15,000 feet were strongly discouraged, as the Lightning's performance became unassailable at those heights. A few units tried to lure P-38s into low-altitude turning fights, but American pilots had learned to stay disciplined, never accepting combat on the enemy's terms. Meanwhile, industrial capacity deepened the imbalance. Lockheed's production line in Burbank, California was operating at remarkable efficiency. By March 1943, the factory was producing 10 new Lightnings every day. Each aircraft demanded roughly 37,000 man-hours to build, yet America's vast industrial base made such output entirely sustainable. Japan, constrained by material shortages and mounting bombing damage, struggled even to replace its combat losses. The widening gap in pilot training made matters worse. American P-38 pilots arrived in the theater with over 300 flight hours, more than 50 of those in the Lightning itself. They had drilled relentlessly in vertical maneuvers, precision gunnery, and coordinated formation flying. In contrast, Japanese replacements rushed through shortened training programs, averaging fewer than 100 total flight hours. Many had never flown higher than 20,000 feet before meeting the P-38 in battle. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea in March 1943 made the P-38's strategic importance undeniable. Flying high cover for Allied bombers attacking a large Japanese convoy, the Lightnings engaged Zero escorts with flawless vertical tactics, destroying numerous enemy fighters and ensuring the bombers could strike unopposed. 8 troop transports and 4 destroyers were sunk, crippling Japan's ability to reinforce its garrisons in New Guinea. By then, the names of certain P-38 pilots, including Richard Bong, had already entered legend. The Lightning had not only changed the balance of air power, it had rewritten the very rules of aerial warfare. Captain Thomas Lynch of the 39th Fighter Squadron perfected vertical tactics into an art form, mastering the Lightning's unique strengths. Over the course of his combat career, he would score 20 confirmed victories before being killed in action in March 1944. Lieutenant Richard Bong, meanwhile, continued his astonishing streak, displaying an almost instinctive ability to position his P-38 for flawless deflection shots that ended engagements in seconds. By August 1943, a new name had joined the ranks of America's Lightning aces, Lieutenant Thomas McGuire. Assigned to the 431st Fighter Squadron of the newly established 475th Fighter Group, McGuire achieved his first victories on August 18th near Wewak. Flying top cover for bombers, his section encountered roughly 20 Japanese aircraft. In his very first combat sortie, McGuire downed 2 Ki-43 Oscars and 1 Ki-61 Tony. Only 2 days later, on August 21st, he scored 2 additional kills, becoming an ace in just 48 hours. McGuire's combat philosophy emphasized precision, discipline, and controlled aggression. He believed that success in the P-38 depended on mastering vertical energy tactics and maintaining impeccable gunnery. His later manual, Combat Tactics in the Southwest Pacific Area, became required reading across the 5th Air Force. Within its pages, McGuire described maneuvers such as the McGuire roll, a high-speed barrel roll that allowed a pilot to sustain offensive pressure while conserving momentum, and the vertical reverse, a climbing maneuver that flipped the pursuer-defender dynamic by using the P-38's superior climb rate to outposition the enemy. The strategic implications of the Lightning's dominance extended far beyond the achievements of individual pilots. With a combat range of over 1,000 miles when equipped with drop tanks, the P-38 gave American commanders a reach previously considered impossible. Fighter sweeps from New Guinea could now strike Japanese strongholds as far away as Rabaul, achieving air superiority well before Allied bombers even appeared on the horizon. For the first time, bombers could rely on fighter escort throughout an entire mission, eliminating the deadly unprotected windows that Japanese interceptors had exploited since the war's beginning. The Lightning's long reach and versatility soon made history. On April 18, 1943, the P-38 enabled one of the war's most remarkable and consequential missions. American codebreakers had intercepted the travel itinerary of Admiral Yamamoto, commander-in-chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet, the architect of Pearl Harbor. He was scheduled to inspect frontline bases in the Solomon Islands. Intercepting him would require an extraordinary feat, a 435-mile overwater flight from Guadalcanal, precise dead-reckoning navigation without landmarks, and perfect timing to meet his aircraft at the exact minute it passed through the designated kill zone. Only one aircraft type in the Allied inventory possessed the combination of range, speed, and navigational equipment needed for such an operation, the P-38 Lightning. Major John Mitchell of the 339th Fighter Squadron, 347th Fighter Group, was chosen to lead 16 Lightnings on what would become the longest fighter interception mission of the war. Flying at wave-top height to evade radar detection and maintaining total radio silence, Mitchell's formation navigated for more than 2 hours across open ocean using only compass bearings and stopwatch calculations. Mitchell's precision proved flawless. At 09:34 a.m., exactly as planned, the formation sighted 2 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers, escorted by 6 Japanese fighters. Captain Thomas Lanfair Jr. and Lieutenant Rex Barber rolled into their attack runs as the top-cover Lightnings engaged the escorts. Barber's bursts tore through Yamamoto's aircraft, sending it crashing into the jungle below. Japan's most brilliant naval strategist, the man responsible for the Pearl Harbor attack, was dead. The psychological impact was immediate and immense. If American fighters could reach across hundreds of miles of open sea and strike with such precision, then no Japanese commander was truly safe. The illusion of Japanese invincibility, already shattered at Midway and Guadalcanal, was dealt another devastating blow. The P-38 had not only proven its tactical superiority, but had demonstrated strategic reach that Japan's military planners had never imagined possible. Yamamoto's death forced the Japanese command to confront a grim new reality. Fighter tactics underwent a hasty, desperate overhaul. Pilots were ordered to engage P-38s only under specific conditions, when holding a clear altitude advantage, when outnumbering the enemy at least 3-1, and when achieving total surprise. Even then, they were to break off immediately if their first attack failed. This shift represented a complete reversal of the aggressive spirit that had defined Japanese air doctrine since the beginning of the war, and even new aircraft designs could not restore balance. The Kawasaki Ki-84 Frank, appearing in late 1943, could nearly match the Lightning's speed at medium altitudes but still faltered above 25,000 feet. The Mitsubishi J2M Raiden Thunderbolt focused on climb rate and high-altitude performance but sacrificed maneuverability and range, critical weaknesses in the vast Pacific theater. Neither of these new fighters appeared in sufficient numbers to make a difference. By November 1943, American dominance in the air was absolute. Japanese daylight operations over the Solomon Islands had all but ceased. Naval vessels now moved only under the cover of night. Supply runs to isolated outposts were carried out by submarines or fast destroyers in dangerous nocturnal dashes. The age of Japanese air superiority was over, replaced by the era of the Lightning. The once proud Japanese naval air arm that had swept triumphantly across the Pacific in 1941 and 1942 was now reduced to desperate defensive operations. The numbers painted a grim picture. Since the P-38 Lightning's major combat debut, Japanese fighter units in the Solomons and New Guinea had endured catastrophic losses. The 251st Air Group, which had begun 1943 with 80 pilots, ended the year with only 10 of its original members still alive. The 204th Air Group lost 70% of its aviators within just 6 months. The 510th takes P-38 American units. It was withdrawn from frontline service entirely. While American losses were not negligible, they remained sustainable. P-38 squadrons consistently achieved kill ratios of 5-to-1 or better. More importantly, American airmen who were shot down often survived, rescued by efficient air-sea rescue units, and returned to combat within weeks. Japanese pilots who bailed out over the ocean, however, almost always perished. Similarly, damaged American aircraft were repaired and sent back into service, whereas Japanese fighters with equivalent damage were frequently abandoned due to shortages of spare parts and tools. This industrial imbalance only widened as the war continued. By December 1943, Lockheed had delivered over 2,000 P-38s to combat units, with production exceeding 400 aircraft per month. Japan's total monthly output of all fighter types barely reached 500, and many of those planes were kept at home for homeland defense rather than deployed to the front. The arithmetic of attrition warfare had turned inexorable, crushing Japan's ability to recover. Training disparities deepened the divide. By late 1943, American P-38 pilots were arriving in theater with rigorous instruction in vertical energy fighting, instrument flying, and long-range navigation. Many had even trained against captured Japanese aircraft, learning firsthand the performance limits of their adversaries. In contrast, Japan's replacement pilots rushed through accelerated programs that had been reduced from 2 years to barely 6 months, entered combat with minimal preparation and virtually no experience against the P-38. The human cost of this transformation was profound. Pilots who had entered the war as elite warriors, confident in their aircraft and in their own skill, now faced an enemy they could neither outclimb nor outrun. Letters recovered from downed pilots on captured islands revealed growing despair. Some wrote of recurring nightmares, twin-boomed shadows diving from the sun. Others pleaded for reassignment to ground units rather than face the dreaded Lightnings again. On the American side, morale soared. The P-38 offered its pilots speed, altitude, firepower, and range, every possible advantage. They could dictate when and how to fight, striking only on favorable terms and disengaging at will. This control over the air war gave U.S. pilots immense confidence, which in turn translated into aggressiveness, precision, and success. Confident pilots fought smarter, took calculated risks, and won more often. No pilot embodied this confidence more than Richard Bong. By April 1944, he had surpassed Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 victories. His flying technique had evolved to near perfection. Climbing to altitudes above 30,000 feet beyond the reach of any Japanese aircraft, he would carefully select his targets and dive with devastating precision. Bong's marksmanship was extraordinary. He averaged fewer than 100 rounds fired per confirmed kill. By the end of his career, Bong's total stood at 40 confirmed victories, all achieved in P-38s, a testament not only to his personal brilliance but also to the systematic superiority of the aircraft and the tactics it employed. His victims included seasoned Japanese aces who found themselves completely powerless against the Lightning's speed and climb. In one engagement over Hollandia, Bong destroyed 3 enemy fighters in less than 5 minutes, executing flawless vertical attacks that left his opponents without any chance to respond. Lieutenant Thomas McGuire pushed the Lightning's potential even further. His detailed manual on combat tactics became standard doctrine throughout the Pacific theater. McGuire emphasized teamwork, teaching pilots to fight in coordinated vertical scissors, with pairs of Lightnings working together to trap Japanese fighters between them. His results spoke for themselves. 38 victories scored between August 1943 and January 1945, achieved through disciplined execution and unmatched technical skill. Meanwhile, the P-38 itself continued to evolve. The G model introduced improved turbo superchargers that maintained full power above 30,000 feet. The H model added upgraded engines producing 1,425 horsepower each. The J model redesigned the intercoolers, moving them to the engine booms to enhance both visibility and high-altitude performance. Finally, the L model incorporated hydraulically boosted ailerons that dramatically improved roll rate and maneuverability. Each successive upgrade widened the technological gulf. The P-38J could fight effectively at 35,000 feet, an altitude at which Japanese pilots needed oxygen masks merely to remain conscious. The P-38L's improved roll rate erased the Zero's final marginal advantage in horizontal maneuvering. By late 1944, no Japanese fighter could match the Lightning in any respect. In response, Japanese tactics grew increasingly desperate. Ramming attacks, considered honorable though futile, became more frequent. Special one-way units were formed for suicide missions. Some pilots tried to lure P-38s into cloud banks, hoping to cause confusion and level the playing field. These desperate ploys occasionally achieved success, but none could change the underlying reality of American dominance. The Philippines campaign of late 1944 put the Lightning's maturity on full display. Within days of the Allied landings on Leyte, P-38 squadrons had secured air superiority. Japanese attempts to send reinforcements by air ended in disaster. On November 20, 1944, P-38s of the 49th Fighter Group intercepted enemy formations and shot down 26 aircraft without losing a single plane. Such one-sided results had become almost routine. By this stage of the war, the P-38 Lightning was not only America's most distinctive fighter, it was the embodiment of technological progress, tactical innovation, and industrial might. And over the Pacific, its twin-boomed silhouette had come to symbolize a truth that every Japanese pilot understood the moment he saw it. The age of the Zero was over. B-24 Liberators could now strike targets across the entire Southwest Pacific with confidence, knowing that Lightning escorts would guard them every mile of the way. Japanese interceptors, unable to climb high enough to reach the bombers when P-38s were present, were reduced to ineffective skirmishes on the edges of formation. One by one, Japanese airfields, fuel depots, and supply centers were methodically destroyed. The reconnaissance variant of the Lightning, designated the F-5, played a critical role in this campaign. Flying at extreme altitudes with cameras in place of guns, these photo-lightnings mapped every Japanese installation scattered across the Pacific. Their speed and ceiling made them nearly impossible to intercept, and the intelligence they gathered allowed Allied commanders to target future strikes with surgical accuracy. By early 1945, Japanese air power in the Southwest Pacific had virtually ceased to exist. The few experienced pilots still alive were recalled to defend the home islands, leaving only undertrained replacements flying outdated aircraft to perish in futile defensive sorties. The P-38 had not merely achieved air superiority, it had achieved absolute air supremacy. The human and material disparities were staggering. Between December 1942 and January 1945, P-38 squadrons in the Southwest Pacific claimed more than 1,500 Japanese aircraft destroyed in confirmed combat, while losing fewer than 200 Lightnings to enemy action, a kill ratio exceeding 7-to-1, unprecedented in the history of aerial warfare. Beyond statistics, the Lightning's influence was transformational. It proved that advanced technology, properly applied, could overcome numerical inferiority and enemy experience. It demonstrated that air superiority depended not on traditional dogfighting, but on controlling when and how engagements occurred. It showed that logistics, production, and training were as vital to victory as courage and flying skill. Veterans on both sides remembered the P-38 with a complex mix of awe and respect. American pilots praised its reliability, versatility, and overwhelming combat advantages. Japanese aviators spoke of it as the aircraft that ended their dominance, the twin-boomed devil that could neither be caught nor escaped. Ground crews admired its rugged design and the relative ease of maintenance despite its twin-engine complexity. The Lightning's legacy extended well beyond World War II. Its success reshaped global fighter development. The principle of vertical energy maneuvering, using altitude and speed as offensive tools, became the cornerstone of jet-age air combat. The lesson that speed and altitude outweighed tight turning ability influenced designs from the F-86 Sabre to modern fifth-generation fighters. The P-38's integration of cutting-edge engineering, refined tactics, and structured pilot training became the foundation upon which the modern Air Force was built. Lockheed's design team, led by the brilliant Clarence Kelly Johnson, had done more than create a superb fighter. They had redefined air warfare itself. The Lightning's unusual twin-boom configuration, born of the need to house two powerful engines and turbo-superchargers, granted it abilities that no single-engine fighter could match. Its centralized nose armament eliminated the convergence problems of wing-mounted guns, while its twin engines provided the reliability essential for long missions over the vast Pacific. The pilots who flew the Lightning wrote their own chapter in aviation history. Richard Bong's 40 aerial victories stood as the all-time American record. Thomas McGuire's 38 kills and his tactical innovations shaped fighter doctrine for generations to come. Dozens of other P-38 aces demonstrated that with superior aircraft and training, American pilots could dominate any aerial battlefield. Japanese pilots, facing impossible odds, displayed extraordinary courage. They flew obsolete machines against overwhelming technological superiority, continuing the fight long after all hope of victory was gone. Their testimonies provide invaluable insight into how the Lightning changed the nature of aerial warfare. Across the Pacific, remnants of that struggle remain. The wrecks of P-38s and Japanese fighters still lie scattered in jungles and lagoons from New Guinea to the Philippines, silent witnesses to the ferocious battles that once raged above. Local inhabitants still uncover ammunition, instruments, and personal effects, each relic a poignant reminder of the men who fought and died there. Today, museums around the world preserve restored P-38s. At airshows, their sleek twin-boom silhouette instantly evokes the era when the Lightning ruled the skies. Surviving veterans gather to recount their missions, their lost comrades, and the pride of flying one of the most extraordinary aircraft ever built. Historians continue to study the campaigns where the Lightning proved decisive. The fighter that first stunned Japanese pilots in 1942 remains a symbol of American ingenuity and determination. Modern air combat doctrine still reflects lessons born in those Pacific skies. Altitude and speed remain fundamental, technology must be paired with intelligent tactics and thorough training, and sustained air power depends on industrial capacity and logistics. The coordination of intelligence, technology, and precision operations that enabled the Yamamoto intercept remains a benchmark for modern air warfare. By early 1945, the transformation was complete and irreversible. The skies that had once belonged to the Zero were now the domain of the Lightning. Japan's naval air arm, once among the finest in the world, had been systematically dismantled. The legend of the invincible Zero pilot was shattered by American innovation and discipline. Ultimately, the P-38 Lightning's legacy went far beyond simple victory. It embodied the triumph of democratic industry over militarist tradition, of innovation over dogma, and of methodical superiority over isolated brilliance. The twin-boomed fighter that Japan's pilots had initially dismissed as ungainly had in truth rewritten the rules of aerial warfare. The campaign in the Solomon Islands, where the Lightning first stunned its opponents, became the crucible in which modern air combat was born. Every jet fighter that followed, every missile launched beyond visual range, and every precision strike guided by intelligence traces its lineage to those battles fought above tropical seas. The P-38 didn't just win a campaign, it transformed the very nature of air warfare. For the Japanese aviators who survived, the memory of those encounters never faded. In post-war interviews, they spoke of the helplessness they felt watching twin-boomed shapes plunge from unreachable heights, of the frustration of seeing their deflection shots fall short because the Lightning was too fast to lead, and of the sorrow of watching friends and mentors fall one by one to an enemy that had changed the rules forever. American veterans remembered the war differently. They recalled the thrill of flying the best fighter in the Pacific, the satisfaction of executing perfect diving attacks while remaining in full control, and the reassurance of twin-engine reliability over vast ocean expanses. They remembered always having the high ground, literal and tactical. The P-38 Lightning did more than defeat Japan's air power. It revolutionized the very concept of air combat. In the skies over the Solomon Islands between December 1942 and the war's end, the future of aerial warfare was written. That future would not belong to the most maneuverable fighter or the most daring pilot, but to the nation capable of producing superior machines, training disciplined aviators, and sustaining prolonged campaigns. By the war's conclusion, the P-38 Lightning had shocked, demoralized, and ultimately destroyed Japan's ability to contest the air. The twin-boomed aircraft that had once been underestimated became the instrument that secured American control of the Pacific skies, hastening the end of the war. The revolution it began still echoes today, a lasting tribute to American innovation, industrial might, and the courage of the pilots who flew the Lightning into history.